I'm going to share my screen. Good morning, everyone, again. Share my screen. Okay. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Yes, okay, good. All right. Well, good morning once again, and thank you, Lena, and thank you to the general membership and leadership that invited me here to be with you today. It's really such a pleasure and truly an honor, and so I do thank you, and I look forward to continuing the relationship in various ways with your organization. So I'm going to get started right away because I have a lot to share. And I want you to have time together also to talk about this. So today's topic, as we know, is Visio Divina, and I'm going to be talking about Henri Nouwen's approach to Visio Divina. I was so blessed and so lucky that to be at Yale Divinity School. When I received my Master of Divinity, Henri was there. He was my spiritual director, and I trained in spiritual direction with Henri. So I'm dating myself, but it was about 40 years ago now. But Henri's words, and he continues to be present in my life and continues to inspire me. And I can hear his voice some very important time, clearly when you're in seminary, discerning different things and trying to understand your own gifts. And so Henri was an important person in my life. So, getting started, what I'm going to do is just give an overall idea of Henri's spiritual direction, the things that were important to him, and how then I'd like you to apply that in everything that we talk about today. So Henri was all about a listening heart, and I know you're all very experienced, so you know that it's very important to listen to our directees. Having an open mind is also important. I mean, our directees very often have different feelings than us, and maybe things that seem outside the box, right? But we have to be open to them where they are rather than coming from where we are. So it's very important to be open and to greet them openly. Being non-judgmental, extremely important in that relationship. We have to, I say discernment, and I think when we think about discernment, we think about making decisions. But what I mean here is also discerning in the moment, and as you move through your relationship with your directee, what's happening for you, the self-awareness, but also discerning what's happening for your directee. And then understanding it as a journey. That this is a journey that they're on, there's no really destination is there until we are resting in the arms of God. So, and we are the companion along this journey. And so being a companion, I think, is important language difference from saying that you're leading them or guiding them. You might provide some guidance, absolutely, this is our role, and we're facilitating this relationship that they have. But it's important to understand that we are also right? We're journeying as well, and our journey is impacted by our directees. So each of us has a unique way to pray. I'm just going to try to move my screen to move all of you to the side so I can see my own screen. So we each have a unique way to approach. Oops. Sorry. Okay. To pray, and we each have a unique way to approach God. Henri very often, talked about his way, right? But he meant that as a way to be authentic. We only have who we are when we come to God and when we enter into that relationship. So that's the authentic way to approach God, is from who we are, and we need to accept that in each other and certainly in our directees. And so as you accompany your directees, it's about facilitating an approach that's beneficial to them. Again, this is very reviewing, but I just want you to look at the things on the left from Henri's importance to all the things on the right of the screen here. So we want to introduce various methods. Again, we have to be open. We have to be non-judgmental. Our directee may come to us with a method or a practice that they want to try. It might not be comfortable for us, but we have to find ways to respond openly without judgment as we move forward with people. And often we're helping them to understand and name the theology, the theological concept that they are acting from or they're speaking from, so that they can have a deeper understanding of the theology. That happens sometimes. And how does that relate to what's happening with them spiritually? So again, it's discerning with your directee what's happening. We want to also acknowledge that the relationship evolves over time. We need to be open to that. We need to be non-judgmental of that, etc., so that we're not judging ourselves or the directee when perhaps it's even time to end that relationship or shift that relationship. And of course, honoring the directee's relationship with God, and with all of these things in mind: a listening heart, open mind, being non-judgmental as we journey with them. I think we're going to save questions and answers for the end, so I'm just going to continue. If there's something urgent, if maybe you can raise your hand, and Lena, you can help me if somebody raises their hand. Okay, so what is Visio Divina? Just as Lectio Divina, which maybe we're more familiar with as a practice, is a sacred seeing, so Visio Divina is a sacred, Lectio Divina is a sacred reading. Visio Divina is a sacred seeing. So we need to enter this experience with an open mind too, because often we are surprised by our prayer time, aren't we? And so this method is no different than any other practice. Expect to be surprised, I would say. And we want to enter with love. It's very important to enter this. I'm sorry, we had a little glitch, and I want to be sure that I have my notes properly here, so I don't forget anything. Okay, so we want to enter this experience with a feeling of love and see with the eyes of love. It's very important. You know, we see so much, right? And right now, especially with social media and sensationalism, we're bombarded with images, violent images, images that we sometimes, are disturbing, right? And sometimes we need to see them. It's not that I'm saying to close our eyes, but I'm saying that, and Henri used to say this, that you choose what you see. We do choose what we see. In some parts of our life, we can choose. Not always. I mean, you close your eyes at night, you're still seeing, yeah? We might be silent. We may be riding on a bus, and we still see. We dream and we see. But there are times of the day that we can also choose what we see. And of course, with Visio Divina, we want to enter into that relationship. Today, we're talking specifically about icons, and understand Visio Divina as a gateway into the divine. The way any other method of prayer is really about entering into a deeper relationship with God. So, and we just want to remember that icons are written; they're not painted. I mean, they're created, and they use paint and gold and different methods, but they're really meant to be read. That's why very often they're flat or dull. They're not three-dimensional. There's not any special creation with that maybe an artist would use. It's a little different. And I know today we're not talking about iconography, the methods of iconography. I think you're probably familiar with that. But just to remind us that we're reading them. So what are the benefits of Visio Divina? Of course, it's a new way. Possibly you've done this before, but it can be a new way to understand a relationship and enter into relationship with God, or deepen our relationship with God. And especially, again, remembering that we're working with our directees, right? So it might be something new for them. And it's an affirmation of a grace that's freely given. Just as we respond, as our hearts and our souls and mind respond to God in other forms of prayer, and we receive this grace that's so freely given. This is another benefit of Visio Divina. And of course, we grow. We're always growing and maturing as we experience different modalities of the spiritual life. And this is no different. And it's an easy practice. I believe it's easy to do. We don't have to go to a certain place. We don't have to. It's not time driven. We don't have to be at church at a certain time. So the structure of it is more according to the individual. How you use it in your practice, I mean, we'll talk more about that later. That might be a little different because you might want to lead your directee into the experience of Visio Divina. But it is an easy thing to do. And there's no wrong or right way. It's a form of prayer. So we have to be open, as we said before, non-judgmental of what comes up for people when they do Visio Divina with an icon. And we can also develop a relationship with an icon that can become lifelong. It's almost like we memorize the icon. It's like memorizing the Lord's Prayer. I mean, I'm going to share with you the icon that's very important in my life. And it's an icon that if I can, in the middle of the night, I can think and pray with that icon because it's kind of been imprinted now into my mind and into my vision. So that's a really good benefit. So how do we practice Visio Divina? Again, many of these things apply to other ways that we pray. What is our disposition as we enter this? What is our disposition of heart? What is our intention? Do we bring intention to our prayer? I know often I'm sometimes pray the rosary, but I may pray the rosary with a particular intention. Maybe for somebody's needs or something like that. But it could be very personal. Again, discerning, making a decision, that kind of thing. But it's important to dispose your heart and have an intention in your mind. Creating a holy space. Again, these are things that we do with other modalities of prayer. That holy space can also be an interior space, yes? So that I can be anywhere. I can be on an airplane, and that becomes holy ground when I am connecting myself to the heart of God. Henri, actually, it was the Desert Fathers, I believe, but Henri, when in training, often said, we need to breathe in. Our very breath is God, right? So that all of everything that we do and say and have our being is in God. And connecting that to your breath can help you during the day to create a holy space wherever you are. And then I would encourage you, especially at the beginning, to pray with a familiar icon. Now, that may take a little time to be familiar with one, but maybe you already have some images and iconography around you in where you work, where you attend church. So pray with a familiar one, but I also encourage you to look for new ones that you can pray with and be moved by. And find one that the reproduction is faithful to the original. Very, very important. The one that I'm going to share with you has many different iterations, but it's important to find the one that is really faithful to the original. This was very important to Henri. He always focused on that because, again, even though they are written for our edification. It's important to have the context and to know a little bit about why they were created. And then in terms of how you look at an icon, I have to thank Lena. We actually did a little bit of Visio Divina, didn't we, in our opening prayer and meditation. It wasn't an icon, so to speak, in terms of it wasn't necessarily, created as an icon, but isn't the cross really the ultimate icon for us? And so I entered into that as a Visio Divina, and had a spontaneous response to that. So again, we need to listen and receive. So we need to be open to what the message is there for us in prayer. And then what's the response of that? And again, Lena asked us to offer that all up to God. Same thing when you pray with an icon. Different things will come up. You may have a feeling of gratitude. Questions may come up, or a desire that you have or a need that you have. So these are sort of the progress through a session of Visio Divina. So just a few additional thoughts. I'm just watching my clock. Why don't we use other forms of art? Why aren't we looking at a Rembrandt or other forms of art? Well, as again, we're not reviewing how icons are created, but we do know that they were made for the purpose of deepening our relationship with God, and really for the purpose of our salvation, is what Henri would have said. So I'm just looking to my notes here. So some may even seem more attractive, may seem more accessible to us, right? Like the cross, you know, I mean, it's very accessible. It's something we're very familiar with. But, you know, we want to experience praying with the icon because it was written specifically for us, for our edification and for our salvation. And it's also meant to be an opening, right? We said before, a gateway into the divine. So it's a way to make visible to our mind and hearts that which is invisible. So they're painted or written to lead us into that inner room of prayer and to lead us closer to the heart of God. So again, develop your own style. I just want to affirm you in that. And you can practice this alone or in a group. So of course, with your directee, you may start a session with a prayer that's focused on an icon, and especially if there's one that speaks directly to your directees where they are in their journey, or perhaps, you know, perhaps they've been talking a lot about the Trinity. Maybe they're struggling with that. Maybe they're talking about the Holy Spirit or about Mary as the mother. I mean, it could be anything that your understanding is important to them in their journey. Maybe you want to introduce an icon that would help them to go a little bit deeper into their understanding of that theological concept. So something to think about with your directees. And then even as a group, you certainly can pray with an icon the way we do other prayers communally. You can do that. And then some other further reading I wanted to mention. You're probably familiar with you know, with this one. If not, this is Henri Nouwen's book on praying with icons, and this is the old version. But I like it because it has, if you can find it, it has the icons in a large, you know, large print. Not large print, you know, in a larger page. And the other one is, those of you, I know that many of you are experienced in spiritual direction. This is by Janet Ruffing, and she really talks a lot about how we respond to our directees and some of the challenges that we face. And it's really excellent in terms of developing your own style and your own understanding of how you react and respond in your spiritual direction. So today I want to talk a little bit about this particular icon. It's the icon of the Holy Trinity. Maybe you're familiar with it. I don't know. You've probably seen it along your travels in life. But it's Rublev's icon. It was written in the 14th century, and it was written at a time when there was great, unrest and violence in Russia. And Rublev specifically, you can see that these are feminine images of the Trinity, and actually angelic images of the Trinity. We don't have time for me to get into too much more detail about the history of this icon, but I think it might be worthwhile for you to take a look at that. But what I want to just focus on here is the invitation. That's the center, the bottom there. This, by the way, this God is on the left, and God is pointing to God's Son, Jesus, in the center. Jesus is pointing to the Eucharistic offering on the table, his self-sacrifice, and the Holy Spirit is pointing, is on the right, is pointing to the empty space at the bottom of the altar. That empty space is for us. This is an invitation into relationship with God as Trinity. So that space is for you and for me to enter into this relationship. That's the invitation. But you can also see that the figures of God and the Holy Spirit are also poised on that road. It's almost like a path, yeah, where their feet are. It's not haphazard, and we can see their feet, and they're getting ready to stand and join us. So it's this idea that we enter in through this, the life of Christ, life, death, and resurrection, the Paschal mystery, but it's also an invitation into the entire relationship. And it's not something that is only in heaven and it's in our time now. We live in Chronos, don't we? We live in not only in chronological time, but we live in Kairos also. So it's that the Trinity is entering into our life as well. Okay, so the only other thing I'll say about in terms of Rublev was that it was a time of fear and violence, right? So I think with what's going on in our world today, it speaks as much to us about that as well. And if this is a place that we can enter and understand, yes, there's the suffering, but also that we're living with God in the midst of that suffering, and God is with us in the midst of that suffering. And so what is the invitation to you in that? And actually, the halos around them even will form a cross. That was Henri's. Let's say, response. This was an icon that was in a retreat room where he was on retreat for a long time, I think a month, and it was hanging over his desk in the retreat cell. And so he had various responses to it, and that's one thing was the circle of love through which we enter and we receive God in this relationship. Okay, so I think we're coming up on time, I believe, a few more minutes, right, Lena? I have a few minutes, 4 minutes. So, in terms of your professional and personal experiences, I wanted to offer up kind of an opportunity for you to enter your 5 minutes. You're going to have 5 minutes just of personal reflection, and then time to be in your breakout session. So I wanted to offer up 2 ways. So we don't have a lot. 5 minutes isn't a lot of time, but maybe personally, is there an invitation to you today that was a spontaneous response to this icon? And maybe in the 5 minutes you have, do you want to spend some time with that? Or do you want to think a little bit more professionally about how is our relationship with the directee an invitation into relationship with God? And how do we nourish, okay, as we look at this Eucharistic table with this invitation, how do we nourish our directees in their spiritual journey? Other things to consider on a personal, did you have a response? If you spend some more minutes in prayer here, what is your response to this Visio Divina today? And again, when you're together, obviously you can share as you wish. And if you did have a response, what came up for you? Something to think about. Professionally, how do you imagine you might incorporate this practice of praying with icons into your professional practice of spiritual direction? And if you think you might be able to, what are some of the challenges or some of the blessings that you anticipate might arise in doing so? So those are some of the questions I'm putting out to you. When we come back together, we can share about your experience in your breakouts. And I'm happy to answer questions at that time. Lena?
Thank you so much, Laura. Yes. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. And I think that you now can stop this sharing.
Okay.
Yes. And now we have 5 minutes. And we have this personal reflection. And Laura gave us a question. And after 5 minutes, we will go to this sharing in subgroups or sharing with each other. Laura, now you can maybe stop sharing this screen. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And the first group, your feedback or questions.
Who is the first group?
Yeah.
I don't know. I was in third group.
I can talk. I don't know if we were the first group.
Okay.
Or not.
Okay.
In Lena's group.
Yes.
And so just wanted to, give kind of an overview of what many of us said. So many people said, oh, I had this icon right next to me today. And so anyway, that was encouraging. And also many people said that if they use an icon, the Trinity icon is the one that they often use. Also, there were many of us that said that they had not used icons with in spiritual direction because of the makeup of their, I would say, the church background of their directees, that they might not be open to it, and and that they were not, I would say, their relationships with the directees were not at a place where they would do that. But also, other people have said that they use Visio Divina and icons more in a group spiritual direction setting. And one person, well, a couple too, said that they use imagery in general, not necessarily icons or what we would say holy images, which help us get from our head to our heart and go deeper into our relationship with God. And that goes as well for us as individuals, as directors in our growth, in our relationship with the Lord, but also in helping our directees. So that's kind of an overview. We had a lot of interesting things to say, and what you have shared with us already today, Laura, has been much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Leel, who present your group?
I said I would feedback on our group, and we shared some stories about personal use of the icon, but also other forms of art, and we talked a bit about sculpture and a three-dimensional way of praying with some art, and the value of paintings, not icons but paintings. And then we also talked a little bit about how to present an icon to someone that we were directing, and a bit about where that person might be coming from, and was it appropriate to use an icon in that setting. And also maybe not giving them too much information at the beginning, but just letting them sit with it and see what happens. So not sort of giving them overload on the technicalities at the beginning. We talked about lots of things. We were very fortunate to have Laura in our group, so that was really good. And we bounced ideas off her. Yeah, I think that probably covers what we talked about, unless anyone wants to add anything.
Well, I would just add that, and thank you, that maybe discern how much information to give, depending on your directee or your group. That because someone in our group also said that there was value in having some detail, maybe not too much detail was my point, because it can overwhelm you, but it can be helpful even if you offer up a question, about entering into that prayer the way you would with another object or another way of prayer. But there is value in just keeping it simple, as you said. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And now the third group.
Yes, Sister Teresa will tell about it.
Yes, most of the people noted how valuable praying with this icon was in today's world, because as Laura had mentioned, it is not so difficult as it is the world of Rhubarb with its unrest and its threats. to our societies and to our very lives. For example, someone mentioned that it mentioned that how God receives us in the midst of this trauma, at his presence, and also was touched by the fact that the feet of the Father and the Spirit was so touching in that they would be with us in this path through this unrest. Some had said that they had used this already in praying and preaching and teaching, although they hadn't used it as Visio Divina. One mentioned that one of her directees writes her own icons in describing her own situation, her own spirituality, which is, of course, another possibility in this case. And also mentioning that how good it is to sometimes pray with our eyes in a good way, and in doing that, perhaps to keep the idea that Laura presented about keeping this image then in our mind, that we can always see it, even though it isn't present. There was also the question of how to explain about icons and using them in prayer to people of other traditions, which is a good thing to talk about sometimes.
Thank you, Teresa, so much. Maybe there are some questions to Laura, and we have 5 minutes. We can use it.
Thank you, Laura. I appreciate your presentation. This is Fabio, and I'm in France right now. And sometimes I'm outside. I don't have an icon, and sometimes I look for icons in my cell phone, but sometimes I don't want to even look for anything in my cell phone. I just want to see the trees and the clouds, in a very nice French area, countryside. Just look at the grass and just apply the same principles in the Visio Divina, look at nature.
Thank you. Good point. Again, it's about, what he's pointing out is this intention and our disposition of heart. And Henri, again, as I mentioned, and it was the Desert Fathers, I think he referred to, that every breath we take, is God, Yahweh. We're breathing in and out of I think they even put the words Yahweh, so no matter where we are, we can be seeing many different things that we can enter into prayer with.
The mention of even Fabio mentioned as nature as an icon, in a sense, reminds me about now and during soon we will be having Advent time, and although I'm no longer there, I think of Finland at that time when it gets darker and darker, and I can relate to the Hebrew people for centuries waiting for a savior. And here and there in Finland waiting for the light, and it seems to get darker and darker, and then the light begins to increase again, bringing hope that again about the coming of Jesus in so many ways in our lives. And to me, even that situation can be an icon that you can pray with.
Thank you. Indrich.
Yes, I wanted to ask you whether there are any steps in Visio Divina, like Lectio, Meditatio, Oratio, and Contemplatio, some, let's say, a method of how to do it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that there is not. It's merely more of a disposition of heart, and then a soft gazing, and then a kind of receiving and a response, a spontaneous response. So in a way, it mirrors those steps. And I think, especially if you're very familiar with Lectio Divina, and it's a method that you it's good for you. I think you certainly can follow that same method in a way, right? Which what we're saying. So, but it's not as structured in that there's no, again, that is a very specific, Lectio Divina has that very specific structure. The prayer your response of your heart may come quickly with Visio Divina. It's different than taking in written word. Yeah, this is it's written, but it's a visual, so it's a little bit different. So I think again that openness and be willing to experience it as it happens.
Thank you so much.
Thank
And
you.
now we have one more question, and yes. Please, yes.
Yeah, I'm returning to that, the last question just as well, because when I was doing Lectio Divina with a picture, if you like, the Visio Divina, but even with the Lectio with younger people, I actually devised a simplified way of 4 steps rather than the contemplatio, oratio, and that. What is it saying at the level of imagination? And is the first step, and then what are you hearing? What's it saying at the level of rational mind? And then what's it saying at the level of emotions down? You know, so that sense of bringing them down from imagination right into their being. And then how have you been invited to respond? And I do the same with whatever pictures I use with them as well. I take the same 4 steps: imagination, rational mind, emotions, and then your response, for what it's worth.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for all of you. And thank you, Laura, once more time. So much.
You're welcome, and thank you. But if I could share my screen, I wanted to I have a closing quote here that I wanted to just put up on the screen quickly. Is that all right? So my prayer for you today is that icons were painted for the glory of God and for our salvation. So through prayer, may they be imprinted in your heart, strengthen the awareness of God's magnificent and loving presence in your life. May they become faithful guides on your journey and vital sources of lasting joy and peace. From my friend and yours, Henri Nouwen. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and God bless you.
You're welcome. You're
Yes.
welcome.
Yeah.
And please feel free to reach out to me if I can ever, if you'd like to, any further conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And now we have a 30-minute break, or around 30 minutes, and we will meet again in my time, 3:45. Probably you have a little bit different times then, but 45, yes. And then we have this second masterclass, remaining grateful in the face disappointment, loss, failure, and grief, Dr. Edward Warrington. And now let's go to the little break and see you soon.
Thank you.